the people will buy it. But when you're looking at it from a productive perspective, there's a different mindset and a different strategy. And I like that comment. Now, this is interesting. Which will be the standard C-suite role? Because we, as a profession, started to use the Chief Procurement Officer, it's lost its value. So there's a new title that has come out, the Chief Supply Chain Officer. In the US, some call it the Chief Supply Officer, which is in line, in terms of the changes. Now, you see what is happening with the Chief Operating Officer? In 2009, the same people thought, 44% of them thought it was going to remain in 10 years. Look at it now, halved. More and more C-suite COOs are being replaced by the Chief Supply Chain Officer, of which the Operations Director report into. And then you have procurement also reporting into. What are the critical skills requirements? Very interesting. Because they want us to be elevated into the boardroom, they want us to understand corporate governance. What does it mean? They also want us to transform ourselves into directors and not managers. There's a difference. Directors direct, managers manage. You can't have both. You might have an experience as a manager, but not necessarily as a director. And please, colleagues, not all of us are cut out to be directors. We need to accept that fact. Negotiation skills is very, very critical when it comes to being a Chief Supply Chain Officer. You really need to understand what negotiations is all about. There's a difference, I always say, between negotiating, agreeing, and contracting. In Africa, we spend too much time on contracting. We need to negotiate. It's good to contract and have the legal things in place because that is how life is. But we must negotiate. The art of negotiation is critical for industrialization. Now, this is very interesting, colleagues. In 2005, I was talking about a conflict of interest. Look at what these CEOs are now saying. Should procurement be sitting in treasury or under trade? In 2009, 31% agreed that there was a conflict of interest. In 2013, 62%. And if you add the agree and disagree, the two variables, you will see that over 86% of the respondents say that this is a problem. What are we doing about it? How can you manage a purse and also help with transformation? But where are we? To obviously challenge and try and get our decision makers to see sense. They copied that model from Europe. Does it fit into Africa? When you are trying to transform the society, it costs money to create jobs. What are we doing about it, colleagues? This is key. Unless this is resolved, another 50 years, we will be talking. Now, what are the implications, colleagues, of these findings? We are definitely back into the boardroom. But the question is, are we ready? Now, there's a lot of pressure on the fraternity right now to deliver because our practitioners are not necessarily professionals. And unless we come up with the right people to fill these vacancies, somebody else is going to take that role again. Finance saw that gap, and then they went in. Very soon, if you are not careful, because of all this corruption and issues and challenges within society, procurement professionals, you might be reporting to the police. Because that's the only way that they can control you. So be very, very careful, and you have to come out of your shell. We also need to look at, obviously, the way we upskill our practitioners into professionals. And I think that academia also has a role to play in that. Sept definitely has a role to play to set the standards. And I'm pleased to say that, I mean, when I was in Zambia, they've come up with some remarkable global standards, which is really going to shake up the skills development industry associated with procurement and supply. We cannot afford, as a fraternity, to have academic pontifications. There has to be what you call a practical and an academic aspect coming together. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And SBL obviously is doing whatever it can with its professors, very experienced professors here, to try and provide the practical aspects of the profession. And there's one professor here who's written a book on contract law, which I think you should have a look, Professor Okaridia. Very interesting book, which I bought one, and I looked at it, very interesting. I'm not trying to sell his books, but it's a good book, which I believe so. Colleagues, now what is emerging in terms of the current structure? Before, this was the structure for many organizations. You had your chief financial officer, your chief marketing officer, and then obviously the chief paper pushing officer, procurement, reported into finance. And then you have logistics and operations reporting